All right. I think we are live. Sorry about that, everybody. We had a tech glitch with LinkedIn. They thought we were starting 15 minutes earlier than we were supposed to start. So we are going to start this all over again. Good morning. Do not change the channel. This is Logtech Live with Eric Johnson, but he is in Thailand this week. And so myself, Sarah Barnes-Humphrey, and Brian Glick of Train.io are taking over and co-hosting this week's episode of Log Tech Live. I tried to channel Eric Johnson. I was going to slick back my hair and put some glasses on, but I decided not to. Anyways, my name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, as well as the Blended podcast and our new nonprofit, the Blended Pledge, so we can see more diverse voices on industry stages. Today with me is Brian Glick. Hello, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sarah. It's good to be here.
I know, right? So why don't you tell everybody who you are?
So I'm Brian. I'm the founder and CEO of Chainio, and we are a data integration platform. So we do all of the plumbing between shippers and freight forwarders and the like, so that everything can flow naturally and people can stop rekeying paperwork.
Nice. I love that. And we've got Mustafa from Finland, so we know that we're doing something right. And we are live on LinkedIn, which is great. We've also got Richard from Nigeria. So
So
welcome
this
and
is this
stay.
is what happens when we let Eric go on holiday.
I
None of us know
know,
how to work the
right?
computers anymore.
LinkedIn is like, you're not Eric Johnson, so you kind of need to leave right now. I do not know what is happening. So we've got everybody tuning in. I am so glad that this is all working out for us today. All right, we've got Jens from Hamburg, Wissam from Dubai, Larry Lung, who's a great friend of both of ours, is here as well, and Abhishek from India too. Welcome everybody. We've got a jam-packed episode for you, and we're going to go through some hot topics in supply chain right now, starting with this first article. So this article is talking about, is it the OSRA or the OSRA?
Oh,
Are people
oh, I
like
think it's
mashing that together?
OSRA, Shipping Reform Act.
I don't know. Some people mash those things together. Some people, spell it out. So the OSRA apparently is signed. And there are a lot of implications on this. I think Biden just signed this on June 16th, and it talks about how the FMC, I think, has a lot more control over a few things that are happening in ocean freight. So Brian, walk me through this. What does this actually mean for the industry?
Well, actually, I was down in DC last week, kind of talking to some people from the administration about this, and I think what it really means is there's a lot of things in there, right? So we could take a couple hours just for this topic, but one of them is a much stronger position from the government about enforcement on detention and demurrage, and what I think that means from a tech standpoint is that shippers, freight forwarders should be putting themselves in a position to take advantage of that. And what I mean by that is you don't want to leave it to the FMC and the carriers to sort this out. You want to be able to, if you're a forwarder, provide the data to your customers so that they can make these claims and that we can make sure that you're being treated fairly. So all new use of data there in how to help you get some money back if you're being unfairly charged.
Yeah, and so from what I'm understanding and what I'm reading,
Mhm.
they're talking about how steamship lines cannot refuse cargo space, which is very interesting. I don't know how they're going to control that. And then the second one is investigating the claims of demurrage and detention. I mean, that's been
Right.
a big piece of conversation over the last 6 months or so. And then charges that are reasonable or unreasonable and order refunds or things like that. And I,
So
I mean,
so
first of
cut
all,
me
what is
off.
reasonable?
Well, so cut me off. I'll get into this as deep as you want. You cut me off when I'm talking too much.
Okay.
So the refusing cargo thing, as I understand it, is more about the repositioning of empties and the complaints by U.S. exporters that empty containers are being prioritized over full containers on export basis.
Yeah.
Because when there's an empty that goes over to China, the steamship line can then immediately fill that, as opposed to sending a full container. They have to
Yeah.
wait to get it back before they can fill it. And so politically, that's not really something that Congress likes, because the American farmer is hurt by that. Is the claim. As far as unreasonable, the position of the FMC on detention demurrages, it's the reason those penalties exist is to make an incentive for companies to move containers quickly. So if there's things where you're getting a penalty, but it wasn't your fault, it's not really an incentive anymore. And that's what they're talking about, is saying the fact that you're stuck in these situations where you can't pick the container up and you're getting charged for it, that's not creating the behaviors that the law is supposed to be there for. And that's what the FMC is trying to crack down on.
Well, and the other
But
thing
I'm
that
just an IT guy, so
well, the other thing that this article talks about is giving everybody in the industry a voice, which,
yes.
I mean, I hope that that's going to happen, and hopefully that is the end result, because everybody does need to have a voice, and for too long we haven't had enough voices sort of speaking up and being elevated. But do you really think this is going to have more accountability on the ocean carriers? Like, is this actually going to work?
Yeah, I do think it will. So in my conversations with the FMC and with kind of other people involved in this, they really do, at least under this administration, that the government wants to take action here, and at the highest levels in the U.S., supply chain is it's not just they don't see it as a hot topic because of last year and then it's not going to be hot. They see this as a permanent thing that the government needs to have more of a role in.
Yeah,
What that role is certainly always open to debate, and
yeah.
people will
Moving
will
target.
um will it'll be a moving target, and but I think it's not something that's necessarily going to go away.
Mm.
And I do think there's a little bit of a new reality here.
Yeah. Well, and I think money talks, right?
Mhm.
Because this article talks about how Hapag was fined April 800,000, and in June 2 million.
Yes.
So, I think at the end of the day, more accountability, but money kind of talks too, right? And
Mhm.
so nobody wants to see these kinds of fines, no matter how much we're charging for ocean freight. All right, let's get into our second article. But before we do that, I want to say happy Canada Day to all the Canadians in the audience. And is it happy July 4th? Is that what we say for
I think that would be
Americans?
close enough. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to say happy Canada Day and then happy July 4th weekend. I know that we're kicking it off on the right foot with this particular episode of Logtech Live. So, the second article is really talking about inventory overhangs. Now, I talked about this on my live show, Thoughts and Coffee, on Tuesday, where Walmart and Target are coming out publicly and talking about how they have way too much inventory. And what we're seeing is that a lot of retailers do have too much inventory, and it's affecting the exports, like you were talking about, with those empties not necessarily going out, because retailers are actually hoarding containers at the moment and chassis because they've got nowhere to put their inventory. So what do you think about this?
What do I think about it? I think this is what the bullwhip looks like, right? And
Mm.
it's, you get big swings in one direction where we have nothing, and then big swings in the other direction where we have too much. And I saw some comments from Peter, who wrote that article. Apparently spoke the other day. I was catching up on Twitter this morning about a light at the end of the tunnel in 2023, about maybe seeing some of this stuff level out, but we're right now we're on that roller coaster where you're getting slammed to the left and then slammed to the right.
Yep.
That's kind of the feeling right now. And so this is the snapback from last year.
Well, we're going into peak, right? And so
Yeah.
now they're thinking that that is going to potentially be a slow peak for this year and potentially help with some of the backlog that we've seen, because we've been saying that we've been
Mhm.
needing a relief for a while. So if the predictions are right and if we are going to have a slowdown for peak, I think it might be a good time and a good thing for supply chain. However, we do have the disruptions with the labor potentially in LA and Long Beach, which is not going to help anybody.
That is very, very true.
Right? And it was funny because on Tuesday, Target was talking about how they're downsizing their inventory. So they're going to use data and only focus on essential categories. So I think retailers are also taking a look at buying behavior. And I think they're also thinking about the fact that they've got way too many SKUs that they have to live up to. And so they're looking to really reduce that. But what that also means with inflation, and costs rising, Target and Walmart are going to have some nice sales over the summer months. So definitely take advantage of that because they have way too much inventory.
Yeah, and I think another company to look at there, who has done a really interesting job of that on the product side is Coca-Cola, who has been very aggressive in shedding brands and shedding SKU count over the last 2 years for really the same reason
Huh.
of just saying there's just, how many kinds of soda do we really need to sell? So
Well, and tell me a little bit about that because I just heard that they came out with like a coffee Coke.
they did. I there's the coffee and they're also doing the Jack Daniels work, but I think for everything they're adding, they've
Mhm.
been also removing. So
Removing.
there's a
Okay.
number of brands over the last few years that, and they're not always the Coca-Cola ones, but some of the, I
Other
think they
brands.
had a number of different brands that were all selling iced tea and they sort of consolidated that down to fewer.
Okay.
So I think you will start to see just fewer of these sort of micro brands that you didn't know were Coca-Cola or you didn't know were,
Yeah.
from some of these larger organizations fading out of the shelves.
Well, and I think
So,
we need to see that anyways. I mean, we want to reduce waste, right? We
mhm.
don't want to see these retailers over like having too much inventory and things like that. So I think it's a good thing. All right. Let's talk about our third one and then we're going to get into some exciting news from chain.io which I am super excited to hear about. So this one is, can logistics actually go carbon neutral? Now, this is an interesting conversation because you guys, I don't know if you guys know, but I was recently emceeing the global management meeting for Hapag Lloyd in Hamburg. And I was privy to a lot of really interesting discussions. And a couple of the discussions were really based around sustainability. And what does that look like? And how can we do that? And is there actually fuel on the market? And if it's not on the market, how long is it going to take for us to really see a difference in the fuel that we can produce for these for these vessels so that they can hit their targets. And so I know that one is saying that 2050, they have a goal of 2050. Maersk is saying 2040. Now, those two steamship lines have put their money on ammonia and methanol as fuel. And then CMA and Hapag Lloyd, I know, has a goal of 2045, and they've put their money on LNG, which is liquefied natural gas. So, what do you think about this? I mean, this is a really hot topic because I was speaking to, somebody from Shell and they're like, who's going to pay for this? B, we're doing our best and we've got to be able to figure this out and everybody's got to kind of come together.
Yeah, I mean, I think the long and the short of it is we've got two choices, which are figure this out or perish.
Yeah, true.
So, I don't know that I have a lot of like really insightful things to add on how this is gonna finish.
Mhm.
But it is, I think what's really encouraging is that the conversations are about really specific things, not about whether we should do it. We spent too many decades just arguing about whether this was even worth talking about.
Yeah.
And at least now we're arguing about which tactics to take. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think part of their strategy too is investing in vessels that are more digital. And that's part of their sustainability strategy.
mhm.
So it's not just all about the fuel, it's about how do we use technology on the vessels to make, routes more efficient and different things like that to really help meet those goals as well, which I thought was interesting. But a stat in this article also talks about 74% of new vessels are going to be using alternative fuels, which, I mean, obviously, with those aggressive goals, this needs to be part of the plan, but it's nice to see that that number of 74% is big. But the other part of this, and it says in this article, is that big investments are going to be needed to be able to make
Mhm.
these changes. And some of the conversations between steamship lines, freight forwarders, and shippers, especially the large shippers, are who's going to pay for this, right? And I was in a conversation where one of the large shippers was like, well, we're not going to pass this along to our customers, so we're not going to pay for it. And the freight forwarders in that discussion were like, well, we don't want to pay for it. We've got to pass those costs down to our customers. And then the steamship line is like, well, we can't bear the brunt of all of these costs for the industry
I
as
mean,
well.
I mean, at
So,
the end of the day, consumers pay for everything. and
Yeah.
that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Hmm.
I was I was being argumentative on Twitter the other day, and
You
I made a, and
know.
never once, and I made the argument that, you know, as carbon taxes become real things from the IMO and from other things, that those it would actually, in my opinion, and again, this is just my personal opinion, that those things should actually be line itemed out to consumers. That you should see that flow all the way through. That transparency will
Hmm.
drive better behaviors. If it costs me an extra dollar to get something delivered tomorrow instead of in 4 days, and I can see that line item and it's not hidden from me, I can make an informed decision. Do I really want to make that impact, and am I willing to pay for it? I
Yes.
think being extremely transparent on these charges, I think, we get mad at carriers for accessorials for lots and lots of things that should probably not be accessorials. In my opinion,
Hmm.
carbon should be, and it should be very clear what that cost is, and how that cost cascades all the way down the chain to the consumer, so that consumers can stop asking for things in 2 hours that they really don't need for 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a really good point is the communication, right? And
Hmm.
giving people options and choices
Hmm.
of what that could look like. And yeah, I think we do have to be transparent about it. I don't think that we can hide from this conversation anymore. It's time. We should have made a lot more changes a lot sooner than now, and we all have to come together to make sure that that can happen. So where
And
can people find you on Twitter? Because I really
uh,
want the
at,
audience to follow
at
you on
B
Twitter.
Glick, at BGLICK, and trigger warnings left and right there. So
I think they're gonna have fun
that
following
is,
you.
at B Glick is not a company approved account in any way.
There's the
So
disclaimer. We should have put that on the ticker at the bottom of the show. This is only Brian's personal account and in
there
his
it is. Yes, be careful.
personal opinion.
Fair warning. So
You
if you want
have
to
been
hear about why
warned.
I'm pissed off about my old high school, that was on the stream this morning. So
Well, and the other one I think you should follow is Eric Johnson on Instagram and Twitter, right? Because he's been posting pictures of his trip. I don't know if you saw the picture this morning, but he matched his sunglasses to his shirt and he was like looking all super cool with the
see, I don't get the Instagram, but I do get him on Twitter, and so I got to see all of his touring around the world that he's doing this month. So
Awesome, awesome. All right. So, we're going to be talking about what is currently happening with your company. So, tell us a little bit more about Chain.io. Tell us a little bit about what you've been going through over the last couple of months, because I know you have some exciting news. So, let's, kind of talk about that. And then we're going to get into what it actually means for the industry and what you've been seeing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So again, just quick recap on who we are. We built, or we do this, what I like to call the plumbing, which is all of the data connectivity. So if you've got a freight forwarder who's running CargoWise, and you've got a shipper who's running a 40-year-old ERP, and we've got to get data moving back and forth, and where are these milestones coming from? And we want to add some data from a visibility provider or integrate an email automation platform. Somebody's got to make all of those systems work together. And so instead of IT departments having to argue over tech terms and all these acronyms, everyone just plugs into us. And then we have this data model in the middle where we understand how supply chain works, because we're all supply chain experts, or at least we claim to be. And that lets us broker the data so that these things work out of the box and they work the right way. And we don't mix up a carrier's arrival date with an arrival date at a warehouse, which might be 2 weeks apart. And if you get that data wrong, then suddenly you're telling your customer that stuff's going to be there 2 weeks before it will be, and everyone's mad. So
Yep.
our job is to make all of that stuff that nobody ever sees actually work properly. And the
Awesome.
exciting news is that we recently closed another round of funding. So we got some great new investors in. And what that's going to let us do is a lot of expansion and a lot of investment in growing that network of software companies and partners that are on our network and that can do work together. And really, the goal here at the end of this is to be a lot like Visa or MasterCard, where when you go to a store, you don't have to think about all the mechanical things that happen for you to
Right.
take a piece of plastic and hand it to someone else or put it into a machine and actually have money move around electronically to resolve that process. in shipping and logistics and supply chain as a whole, we don't have that today. It's not obvious. Everybody, it's like if every store you went to, you had to negotiate how you wanted to pay them, and then
Right.
they had to call your bank and they were going to
Oh,
negotiate. And
such a
then,
nightmare.
oh, you want to buy a Coca-Cola? Well, we use a different system for Coke than we do for Pepsi. Like that's how we are today. And so the idea is to
Mhm.
create this network that makes it a lot more like a credit card where you can exchange data and it doesn't matter that people are using different chip readers or a different bank in the back end.
I love that. And I always love how supply chain professionals, especially you, can put it into context of like everyday things. It's so much better when we can do that because then everybody can really understand who we are, what we do, the challenges that we have. And because I recorded a podcast episode, I think on Tuesday, and they were putting it into examples and contexts, like Lego. And they were
Yes.
using Lego and like building blocks and different things like that. And so I love it when people do that.
Shout
But
shout
anyways,
out shout out to my good friend, and I think she's been on the show, Rose Smith, who does the logistics for Lego here in the U.S. and is an old friend of mine.
I have yet to meet her, but I'm
Oh
hoping
well,
to
we're
meet
gonna have
her
to get you guys
sometime.
connected. I
I
thought I
know.
thought we made that happen. So
That's awesome. So you talked a little bit about what the round means to the company. It means
mhm.
to supply chain. How tough was it to kind of raise in this environment? How crazy is the funding environment right now? Because I think we've gone from like everybody pumping in money for the last
Mhm.
couple of years, and now it's kind of like, whoa.
So timing is a funny thing. Um, when you announce a round, and we announced ours, I guess, a few weeks ago, you've actually at that point everything the initial like getting the agreements in place that then go through a legal process and reviews and diligence takes several months. So we actually made the agreements with our investors at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
And we happened to catch it at the moment where if we had done it several months, maybe a month later, we would have gotten caught up in a lot more of what's going on right now. What I can my personal opinion though is as I talk to investors who are, and many of our investors are not supply chain specific investors. um, they were particularly comfortable with investing in Chainio for two reasons that I think apply to the larger industry. One is supply chain's not going anywhere, right? So
Hmm.
if you're investing, if you're starting a consumer app right now, you don't have a completely figured out business model, and it's like, hey, I just want to do a thing. The market's really spooked, and people aren't just going to be like, oh, let me just throw some money at this and see what happens, which
Yeah.
is what was happening a year ago. But the other thing is we're the type of company that is building a real tangible thing that has real business value and a real ROI. And so as money is getting tighter, interest rates are going up, the valuations of companies,
Have gone
like
down.
Slack, like Airbnb, have really taken really big hits.
Yeah.
Um, the ability to tell a story that says, I have a product that I can sell to a CFO who is going to understand that this is going to return money in 6 months to the company. Like these really kind of adult conversations are becoming sexy again. Whereas for a couple of years, it was a little bit more like you could sell the hopes and dreams kind of thing.
Right. And now we can't. I think, have I been driving you crazy by saying chain.io? Because I just heard you say
No,
chain.io.
you get yelled at. If we had my Sarah who runs our marketing department, she'd be yelling at you. But look,
Sarah, don't yell at
as
me.
long as you're
Okay.
saying it, I'm okay.
Well,
However you want to.
I also feel like if I say .io, then people can go straight to your website.
I feel like the Canadians always put the dot in, and the Americans we're way
We
too
love the
fast. We just go
dot.
chain IO.
We
So
love the dot. Anyways, just want to say that. I'm sorry, Sarah. And so do you think we're reaching a plateau in logistics tech, or do you think we're like just at base camp? I mean, to me, like you said, like supply chain has come into the light over the last couple of years. I think it's becoming more sexy. I think people are looking to invest and there's a lot of promise there. I think there's still a long way for us to go. There's a ton of opportunity here because nobody's really solved for everything. And obviously, supply chain from sourcing to last mile delivery, there's a lot of things to solve for.
hmm oh, I think every time you invent new tech, it identifies an opportunity to invent even more new tech.
Right.
So I think we're much closer to day zero than anything else, and that there is a massive opportunity. And I think sometimes people see it as this competition between, um, sort of we have to saying we need to invent new tech is a criticism of the tech that's already there, and
Right.
I think what we really have is a 50 to 60-year continuity from the first real supply chain systems and the first electronic filings with customs and those things which happened in the 60s and 70s.
Hmm.
um, there really is just this continuity and it keeps accelerating and it's really exciting and we're finding new stuff, but we're building on the shoulders of those early tech, and so I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Well, but I also think there is a lot of innovation out there. There's a
Mhm.
lot of opportunities for supply chain professionals to solve for their supply chain challenges with the technology that's out there, but it's also a matter of finding them, figuring out who's out there, what those technologies particularly solve for those supply chain challenges that they're having. And so I think that's another thing that we have to consider as we grow and there's more companies that come into the space. How do we make it easy for supply chain professionals to be able to find those people?
If only there was some sort of neutral network that had a bunch of plugins to a bunch of tech, so you could sit down with a company and say, "Here's all this ecosystem that you can look at in one place," and
Or a
or
supply chain podcast that actually
or a
features
supply
those
chain podcast,
companies.
right? But in all seriousness, that's what we do with a lot of our customers. I actually
Yeah,
just
yeah.
got off the phone with one of our customers or prospective customers in Europe this morning, and we spent 2 days with them during the kind of early sales process, mapping out their business objectives. And we call this digital nervous system. And what it really is mapping out their business objectives and saying, of this 1,000 pieces of tech that are out there, which 2 or 3 do you need to invest in this year that move you forward, right?
Love
And if
that.
you're a company that's doing freight forwarding for like Amazon small business sellers, that's a very different answer than if you're doing repair parts for LNG,
Yeah.
right? So start with your business problems and then come to us and then we help you find the tech that matches that business problem.
I love that. Let's talk about integrating logistics platforms. Eric gave me a stat that you've talked about before, and it says 85 to 90% of the challenges of integrations are common, even though people think their challenges are all super unique. So, what specific areas do people not really understand about integrating logistics platforms?
So I think what people forget in the complexities of their own business and their own problems is that at the end of the day, most things in supply chain are about moving boxes of something. That box might be a container, it might be an entire, bulk vessel, it might be a single parcel going to someone. It's we've got these things and we got to move them to places and then they get transformed and then move again. And when you kind of take it back to that level, the fact that an apparel company is extremely concerned about like style, color, size breakouts,
Hmm.
and that a pharmaceutical company is very concerned about temperature control, right? Those are details and they're important, right? And you can't not have temperature control in pharma. But ultimately the underlying principles of the way that a procure to pay or an order to cash cycle work are, you issue a purchase order, you book some you produce something, you do some QA, you book some freight, you move it, you track it, people get paid.
Hmm.
Those things are very, very common. And it's sometimes really hard especially if you worked in the same company a long time, you learn all your own words. And so you think everything's different. And then it's about getting in front of a whiteboard sometimes and just saying, okay, but what you're doing over here at, I keep using Coca-Cola this morning. Apparently I'm thirsty. What you're doing over here at Coca-Cola and what somebody's doing at Exxon look very different because you use different words, but if we can just draw out that really simple part, they're
Hmm.
actually not all that different.
Right.
You know,
And
and
that's
when you
so
when you do
true.
that, then integration gets easier because you say, I can apply the principles from that other company and worry about that last 10 to 15%, which is the temperature control piece or the, style, color, size piece or the, whatever it is for your industry.
Yeah, and I it's okay if you make people, feel thirsty today. I made them feel hungry on Tuesday because I was talking about Mexican pizzas and the shortage of Mexican pizzas,
Uh-oh.
and how it's completely destroyed TikTok because they were gonna have a day dedicated to Mexican pizzas, and now they can't. Anyways, totally random. I
Well,
kinda squirreled on that moment, but anyways, so one kinda last question, who is best placed to invest in tech over the next 1 to 2 years if demand kind of moderates off of a crazy unsustainable 2021, which it appears kind of that it will, and Eric kind of suggests that that's a good thing.
so who's best placed to invest in tech? I mean, I think you've got your larger providers who do their in-house investments, right? And
Mhm,
those are still really, really important. And again, they don't get headlines, but the work that large forwarders, large NVOs, large carriers are doing really does help drive the industry forward. And I don't think they get enough credit for it just across the board.
mhm,
And I think what they're going to find is that internally, some of their innovation teams are going to be asked to return some investment a little faster and
mhm.
actually build things that apply, which is a very healthy pressure.
Yep,
And then in the investor community, there are some really awesome investors who are specific to supply chain and transportation and mobility. We have a couple invested in our company, including Fontanellis and Eve Atlas, who just they really focus on the area, and then they're able to help educate the general investment community on
yep,
some of these more esoteric topics. So, shout out to them and to other ones like Dynamo is a big one that's out there that with Santosh over it and his team. They do a really good job of highlighting the companies and doing the hard legwork, which
mhm,
lets the general investors come in and really use that expertise. So there is an ecosystem that definitely didn't exist 10 years ago
yeah,
of supply chain specific investors who we can all follow on Twitter and who are all really open about what they see. The team over at Refashioned also would be
yep.
would be a good team to follow.
Yeah,
So
they're a great team to follow as well, and all the ones that you mentioned too. And it's really important, right? Because I remember when I was, trying to do some funding and things like that. Um, you people have a general idea of logistics and supply chain, or they don't really understand it at all. And so they start comparing technology, right, to the
mhm.
things that they see in the market or the things that are kind of in front of them. And you really have to dig down and explain to them what the difference is and why it matters. And so if you've got somebody in your corner from an investment standpoint that understands the community and the environment, they can also back you up on what you're saying. And that's really, really important. And so, that collaboration is really important to the future of our industry as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think also just educating on where we really are. We
Yeah.
had a since we're calling out the Sarah from my team in our marketing today, she and I had a conversation yesterday about visibility providers, and
Mhm.
she's has only been in this industry for 6 months. She came from somewhere else. She's a marketing expert,
Yeah.
and she goes, "How could this possibly be this hard and this complicated? We've been doing this forever.
Yeah.
How could this be the problem we're still solving?" And I'm like, it really, really is. And it really genuinely is that hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes those of us who spend a lot of time in it don't understand or forget that to the average person, the idea that it is next to impossible to track a piece of, a single item
Uh-huh.
from manufacture to delivery is so opposite from how we order a pizza
Yeah.
that like we just
Or an
we get
Uber.
too smart for our own good, and then it's nice to have investors kind of bring it back and say, hey, okay, talk to me like I know nothing, and
Yeah.
we kind of can bridge those gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And like an Uber, I think I used that as an
Mhm.
example on Thoughts and Coffee a couple of weeks ago as well, as being able to, I can cancel the driver.
Yeah, I just need that for chassis now, right?
Yeah,
I just want a chassis in
exactly.
12 minutes.
Well, but it also goes to show that people coming in the industry know that we have a lot of smart people in this industry, and they're
Mhm.
kind of a little bit baffled why we all haven't been able to do
Because
that.
it's the most complicated thing I've ever seen in my life. The global supply chain is legitimately the most fascinating problem I have ever encountered, which is why I stayed in it for 25 years.
That's why I think everybody stays in it. They, get dropped into supply chain, and then they don't leave.
That's very true.
All right, so we've got about 6 minutes left, and I think we kind of end the show with a dad joke. If anybody in the audience wants to share their dad jokes, please feel free to do that. Angela had actually sent us a dad joke from her 8-year-old called Elliot that I want to share with you all. I thought it was a really good one, and shout out to Angela for jumping on that post, sending me a DM, and giving us a dad joke for the week. But I also have one, and Brian has one, so I think we're in for a treat. So Elliot's dad joke: why do seagulls fly over the sea?
Why?
Because if they flew over the bay, they'd be bagels.
Oh,
Ba-da-bum.
that's a
Yeah.
good groan. I like that.
It's so good, right? Rob just came up with one too. What did the ocean say to the shore? Rob, what did the ocean say to the shore? Tell me. Give me the answer. Come on. Let's go. Oh, we just got another one. Okay, Brian, say yours.
All right. So mine's a little, it's really more of a true story and a little personal. I used to hate facial hair, and then it grew on me.
But and actually I didn't realize it, but Rob totally stole mine. So mine was, what
Oh,
did the ocean say to the beach? Nothing, it just waved. Rob just totally stole my thunder. Thanks, Rob.
oh,
So Karina says, why do cows moo? Because their horns don't work.
oh boy.
Oh, we are just getting totally,
I'm
totally
glad
into
I'm
that.
taking the afternoon off because I'm gonna have to recover from these.
Well, when I sort of Googled it, I was like, what are the best dad jokes? I think it came up with 145. I was like, really? There's 145 best dad jokes? Like, how many
Oh,
really bad ones are there?
I throw out about that many a day at my son, so
Oh,
it's
you do?
yeah, but they're all on the fly. When you ask me to remember them, they don't come out that way. They're just really awful puns.
And does he just sort
So
of like roll his eyes at you
he
and be
doesn't
like,
even look at me. He's 13. He just walks out of the room at this point.
just walks out of the room? That must be so much fun.
It is great.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, well, we've got one more question. I mean, we've got 3 minutes. So, Reyes says, is there any relevance for a multi-language system in logistics? That's a really good question. What do you think, Brian?
Um, so I'm assuming we're speaking about spoken languages there. Uh, my experience has been, and even when working, multinationally, that there really just is this convention around English as the language of choice for the actual population of documents. So I've been constantly thinking about that for many years, and obviously I'm bringing an American's view to this, which is biased, but um, I think in the international trade space, probably not so much. Now, where you do see a lot of it is when you're talking about frontline, when you're talking about last mile, when you're talking
Yeah.
about domestic, when you're talking about delivery and shipper instructions for those type of things. There's a ton of value there. Not my personal area of expertise, but certainly I think when you're talking when it's beneficial to the frontline employee who has got to do something with the packages, absolutely. In that international space, I think maybe a little less so.
Interesting. Well, that was a really great question. And I think we're going to wind down. I honestly, Brian, I couldn't have done this with anybody else. I'm super glad that you joined me to co host Logtech Live while Eric is kicking up his feet in Thailand and getting a much deserved vacation, which hopefully both you and I can have over this long weekend
See what we
as
can do.
well. Thank you to everybody who joined us in the audience. And Eric will be back in 2 weeks, 2 Fridays from now at 10 a.m. Eastern. I go live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern as well, in case you want to join us. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Have a great long weekend.
Thank you.